Welcome back to Business Beyond the Blunt. I am your host, Canna Breon, and on today, we're going to talk to someone and about a topic that is very, very near and dear to us here in Virginia. It's really talking about the Virginia cannabis market and what it does look like, what it will look like when it gets here. So on today, we have the executive director and founder of the Virginia Minority Cannabis Coalition, Mr. Paul McLean. Let's give it up for Paul McLean, everyone.
How you doing, man? Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
I am good. I'm glad to have you on. Glad to have you on today. So as I said, today we're going to talk about what the Virginia market looks like. We're also going to get in a little bit to what the story and the birth of VMCC and the work that you do there, and why it's so important. And I believe we're going to discuss a little bit more about why people should know what you do, and why they should get involved. So welcome to the show, Paul. How you doing?
Man, I'm doing great, man. I appreciate you having me on. This has been a long time coming, and I like what you're doing. Man, no, actually, I love what you're doing, spreading knowledge and education about this industry. That's so important because there's so many people out here putting out a bunch of fake news.
Yeah.
I mean, literally a bunch of made up nonsense. And it scares me because that's sometimes the stuff that people gravitate towards and go spread in the barbershop, and they're spreading the wrong information. So
right. Absolutely.
Been looking forward to it and ready to talk, man.
Good. Well, let's go ahead and start. Go ahead and start getting down and dismissing some of this misinformation. But before we get that, please tell us the story of VMCC. Why was it created? The reason why it was created, and who it is there for.
Okay. Well, man, I'll give you the short story because it kind of evolved over a period of months. But about 4 years ago, I had a consultancy and I was representing a client of mine in a real estate transaction with the city. And I was meeting with the city on their behalf twice a month. Mm-hmm. And for 2 years, we have been discussing, hey, eventually cannabis is going to come, and we were talking zoning and rezoning the city and stuff like that. Right. And we kept bringing up cannabis businesses. And the folks from the city kept saying, no, no one's ever going to accept that, blah, blah, blah. And then that following spring, I go into 7-Eleven to get a cup of coffee on my way to this meeting. And I look down at the newspaper and it says the state had just issued 5 licenses. So I was like, wait a minute, maybe I'm misunderstanding this. Buy the paper, go to the meeting. Yeah. And when I get to the meeting, I find out just point blank, the people from the city say, oh, yeah, we kind of been lying. We were working on this, but we didn't want to publicly talk about it. And that made me start realizing, okay, I had been studying the cannabis industry for a decade because I got friends from school that were in the industry in the beginning out west. And man, after that conversation with the city that day, I realized the game was afoot. And I needed to find out how to get in the game or find out how can I get the real information. And so I started working the telephone, talking to representatives, politicians. Nobody knew nothing. And I ended up having someone suggest that I reach out to the state's diversity director at that time. Excuse me, who was Dr. Janice Underwood at that time. And since that time, she has been replaced by 3 other people under the current governor. I couldn't even tell you all those people's names. But talking to her, she explained to me kind of how, and she was the only person that really shared with me where cannabis was falling in state government and how it was under the Department of Agriculture. And I was like, okay, thank you. And I started ringing those folks up and just blew up the phone over the course of a couple of days. And I guess aggravated or irritated them to the point of curiosity because I had real questions. I wasn't somebody calling up with this nonsense, defund, all of that kind of crazy stuff. Right. I had real business questions, and that's where all my questions were stemming from. And after talking with the Secretary of Agriculture and the Deputy Secretary for about an hour, they were like, okay, You know what the hell you're talking about. It's obvious that you've seen parts of this industry we're not familiar with. Would you be interested in participating in this work group process? And I said, for sure. So that's kind of how I got into that space. Once I got into that space, after 2 or 3 of those work group meetings that were taking place, after hearing the word equity come up numerous times, but no one's able to describe what equity looked like, sounded like, tasted like, I realized, okay, there's a need for expertise in this space. And right. I've always been the dude opening doors in industries for people. I've been in 5 industries and before getting involved in cannabis. And I just saw, an opportunity to educate our community about being at the front end of a new industry. Right. Not a company, but at the industry. And a lot of people don't understand the significance of that, man.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it came about. I was looking in that work group process. I realized equity needed to be a real topic, but it needed to come from a position and organization of real structure and organization and purpose.
Right.
And I ended up recruiting and started networking and talking to some people I knew in education and business here in Virginia. And I recruited some board members and officially created the nonprofit, VMCC. And then right after that, we were able to attract some corporate support. And that corporate support gave us the ability to immediately start doing boot camps. And we started doing events and education events and boot camps for people that want to become entrepreneurs in cannabis, and took off from there. And that's kind of what we've been doing. We have expanded to doing a lot of other stuff that I'm sure we'll talk about in this conversation, but that's kind of how it came about, man. There was a need, and I didn't see anyone really in the state talking about business and like starting the business, propping up the business, funding the business.
Right.
A lot of the conversation I heard from other organizations was about equity equaling, Black folks need to be included, which I agree. However, what I have found over the years of dealing with policy in other industries, politicians don't seem to really listen until you explain how what your idea is translates into business revenue, profit, and taxes. And that's basically what I started doing, having those conversations whenever I got the opportunity. And I came across some people that said, hey, man, you're making sense. Is there anything I can do to support you?
Right.
But what I typically found was, hey, man, you're making sense. I got a cousin that needs to talk to you. I got a brother that needs to talk to you. How do people get involved in your boot camp and blah, 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 blah.
Right.
So that's kind of how it came about, man. So doing that and starting to do those events and spread the word in the community is how I ended up getting recognized and appointed to the Cannabis Equity Reinvestment Board for the state of Virginia. And, that wasn't because I had a great smile or I was eye candy. It was because I just had a lot of business ideas. And the thing that was different, I think, about us, we had business ideas and we had business resources to make the ideas real for people.
Got you.
That's how we started doing the boot camps, because we were able to get people that were executives in, equity funds, had managed billions of dollars.
Right.
We were able to get the investor liaison for big MSOs that go out and recruit investors to explain what investors are looking for. We had them talk with small business owners who had owned dispensaries and grow in California and Colorado and some other places. And they got a chance to ask questions from somebody that had already been down this path. So our organization is about realness, tangible, education, something that you can really build on and profit from if you use it right. But one of the biggest things that I'm about, Breon, is getting people exposed to real people in this industry.
Yeah.
Because we got a lot of imposters walking around Virginia.
Talk about it.
I mean, it's amazing how people have tried to blur the lines. You know, when hemp came on the scene legislatively a decade ago, it was all about, you know, medicinal and rope products and clothing and all that stuff. And that's awesome because I got friends in the hemp industry around the country. Some do well, some do not.
Mm-hmm.
Because the thing with hemp is you don't start making money till you got a ton of it. Cannabis, you start making money when you can sell a pound of
it. Yeah.
See, that's a completely different thing. And I think
right.
some of the folks in that industry just started to realize in order to make money in hemp, you got to take a completely different approach. So what if I could pivot and offer something else? And I think that's kind of how a lot of the people that were anti, you know, euphoria and all that stuff at the beginning of the hemp industry in the state are now on the side trying to sell Delta 8 products, trying to prop up stuff like that, because they need the profit. You know, and because it's a hemp license, they can't just necessarily just go grow marijuana.
Right.
And I say that term because people will recognize it, because I still have people that ask me, what exactly is cannabis, Paul?
Right.
And cannabis is the politically correct way to discuss marijuana in this context and in this forum, for people that may not know. But and I don't knock the hemp people for wanting to make money, but I don't believe they should just jump into this lane, because I know a hell of a lot of people that have served time in Virginia for cannabis. I don't know one person that has served time for hemp.
Right.
And we still got quite a few people in the state in jail for cannabis.
Yeah.
So until those people are out of prison and we have people actually in the industry that represent the people that have been incarcerated,
right,
cannabis is my focus. I wish the hemp people all the best, but cannabis is my focus, because that is what has personally impacted my family's life, my friends' life, and that's where my energy and my calling is.
So as we're talking about what cannabis is and the difference of it, can you share a little bit about the stigma behind it? How was that like in the community as you've gone through and trying to educate and get people on board?
It's amazing.
How much is that affected?
It's been, I'll tell you this. The stigma of cannabis has been an eye-opener on two sides of the situation. I'll give you both. First, it's amazing how many people in our community, the black and brown and yellow community, do not understand how the war on drugs came about. You know, they don't understand that when Nancy Reagan was walking around talking about say no to drugs, her husband was making cocaine deals, you know, with rebels. You know what I'm saying? And Oliver North was he was the mule. You know what I'm saying? It's like, dude, the president was the plug. So, you know, to see that, but then not to realize where that came from with Nixon, and even before Nixon, the start of attacking this kind of stuff, man, really came right after they got rid of the prohibition of alcohol. Because I went and did a bunch of research during the holiday season to put together a presentation I was doing, and it was amazing how the taxes that were generated on alcohol the first 12 years after prohibition ended brought the economy back from collapse. And we're talking about only at that time, like $13 billion.
Yeah. Think about it.
Yeah. I mean, that's how small the country's economy was, but that was a means. And that's really why prohibition ended. Because during that time, consumers have been having alcohol. Yeah. So the stigma started to come after alcohol became legal again. Then they went after opium and cannabis. Okay. And cannabis was stigmatized because it was typically associated with minorities, musicians, artists. And then later on, a movie came out called Reefer Madness, and it's still available. You can still find it on YouTube, I believe. But if you were to watch it, if there was a white exploitation film, you know, it's nonsense, because in this movie, they basically built a movie around the premise of if white women smoked marijuana, they couldn't control themselves and they would want to have sex with black men.
Yeah.
And that kind of craziness feeds into people's fear, ignorance that
Yeah.
has been stewing in our country for
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
And so it made it real easy to just attack
Right.
cannabis
Right.
and carry that stigma for years. So, you know, in our community, people didn't realize that we were conditioned to believe that this was going to end society and break up
Right.
families. And that's part of the stigma that I've gotten in modern day, talking to faith leaders in the Black community about cannabis as an economic engine, a job opportunity, an entrepreneurial opportunity. The stigma of cannabis for a lot of them is so heavy and on them, they spit the words of the war on drugs out of their mouth, completely forgetting what they have seen with their own bare eyes. Okay, so I'll give you an example how powerful the stigma is. I know people that have, or I should say, I've met people that have consumed cannabis in their younger years. And I'm talking their younger years is before I was a twinkle in my daddy's eye. You know what I'm saying? I'm talking about people that were smoking weed in the 60s and the early 70s. Okay.
Right. Way before my time.
Exactly. These people now are like 15 and 20 years older than myself.
Right.
Who typically are in positions of influence. Many of them are faith leaders. They're pillars in their church community leaders, people that have been about giving back and contributing.
Yeah.
And see, they smoked weed when they were younger, and they know whenever they smoked weed, they didn't get violent. You know, if they were just consuming weed, they didn't, fall out in the street.
Right.
Weed was not even as strong back then as it is now because of science. But the stigma of cannabis didn't bother them back then. They just felt and experienced the benefits of it. Communed with their friends, all of that stuff. But then when you get older, and now you're 70 years old and you're in a position of influence, because of the stigma, and they're worried about saying, Pastor, you're telling the kids to go smoke dope? No, that's not what the pastor is saying. But the pastor, I've met a lot of pastors that would like to say, cannabis is one of the greatest things that never got introduced to my life because of what it did for me, centering my body and being able to do this. And that stigma, man, makes people uncomfortable talking about the benefits that they have felt and experienced from cannabis. And so I started digging into that last year, and it amazed me because a lot of the people, because cannabis has never really been studied like other medications. When we sat down and it came time to have a real conversation about their experience with cannabis 30 and 40 years ago, or sometimes 2 or 3 weeks ago, they talk from a perspective of, when they're talking years ago, it was just like having a glass of wine with your friends. You know what I'm saying? Getting a beer, watching a football game. It was something as simple as that, where they mellowed out. Okay. When they ever talk about, because I've asked specific questions about violence and cannabis in the same environment. And it's never, if people are consuming cannabis by itself, whenever there's ever some sort of issue, it's cannabis and typically alcohol. He smoked a joint, but before that joint, he had already drank a 6-pack and had 3 shots of tequila.
It's a difference. Yeah.
Exactly. And I've asked people, have you ever seen someone get violent? Have you ever seen people do crazy stuff? No, not just smoking weed, because most people will say the downside is being silly, wanting to eat sweets.
Yeah.
Not knowing why you're eating sweets, having them quote unquote munchies. But it's never, oh, my boy just lost consciousness, fell out on the floor and started vomiting all over the place. Okay. And I say that, and your listeners are probably saying, well, I know somebody. Well, no. If you go and you do the science research from the state of Virginia and other states and other health-related organizations around the country, no one has ever died from cannabis. Just cannabis, the plant being consumed. No, it's, if people have had cannabis in their system and they passed away, there was always something stronger or some combination in them. So that stigma, man, has people willing to deny their own experience and not share the benefits they've had because they're worried about being stigmatized in today's time
Right.
about something they did 40 years ago. So that's one side to it. The other side to the stigma is outside the Black community. And it's amazing how, like, when we first started the coalition, I started trying to put together tours for Black, Baptist preachers to go to the cannabis facility to see the industry in a business perspective from seed to sale, to start to learn and get educated. And for months, I couldn't get any traction. But I have found out that there were some Asian churches, some primarily Hispanic churches here in Tidewater, Virginia, where the church was putting up money to help people. And the industry ain't even here. And so I talked to some of them and they're like, well, I really understand. We really don't need to. We have started, educating our members that want to go down that path. They started putting together like boot camp type events. They weren't as specific to cannabis as our stuff was. But I was just blown away, like, wait a minute. Y'all not worried about it? And the response that I got, Breon, is what kept hitting me. It's not against the law. As soon as it was not against the law and someone could legally possess cannabis in the state of Virginia, and the way the law is written, basically, if you got a medical card, you can go buy it and bring it home. Right. If you don't got a medical card, if you can smuggle it to your house, you're good. That's the way the law is written. But talking to these people that don't look like me, that don't have as much melanin in their skin as us, and I'm just blown away. Like, they see the opportunity to help their church members and position their communities and want to pursue it as an economic vehicle.
Right.
We're going to see what we can do to help you get ahead on that.
Right.
But in the Black church, there's been so much, there's so much heat that pastors take from the members because the members are functioning off of that nonsense from the war on drugs and don't understand the industry. And for that lack of education, I blame the governor. I blame the past governor. I really can't blame the CCA because they're just really getting propped up. But the current governor has made it so difficult for any cannabis-related entity within state government to function and do its job. And one of the main things these people in Richmond were supposed to be doing is doing PSAs to educate the community. And there ain't no real education taking place. That's how VMCC came to step into that spot.
Got you.
Nobody in government was willing to do it. Got
you. So as we're talking about the education piece that goes behind it and getting the movement and the momentum going for it, we're starting to see that people can take this thing in many different ways from many economic vehicles. And one of the ways that we do believe here, especially at Business Beyond the Blunt, is that we focus on the ancillary side of things for people to get inside the business.
Good point.
More importantly, for Black and brown people to get into the industry, so that they can start using skills that they already possess, the things that they're already doing now to either transfer into the industry or just go ahead and start going to industry, whether you want to or not. If it's something you want to do or not do. One thing we really want to look at is the opportunities that come with it. And I do know that you prepare your boot campers for these type of things. So could you take us through just a sample of what the boot campers go through in preparation for trying to join and enter into this market and industry?
Okay, cool. Man, I love how we do this because in the last 2 years, we've taken people that had absolutely no experience being a business owner. And then we've had some other people that were professionals. And then we had some other people that actually owned a business coming in the door. And we've been able to work with all those people to get them to the same benchmarks. And so we can build on each one of those benchmarks for each group of people we bring in there. So when people come into the boot camp, the first thing is, the first phase of it, they go through 25 hours of online video training, independent study, okay? They get about a week to go over these 25 hours of modules. They range in time from 5 minutes to about 45 minutes, I think is the longest one. But they cover all 5 sectors of the cannabis industry. because we educate people on all parts of the industry at the beginning. Because, a lot of people will come in saying, like, I want to have a dispensary, but they have no idea how that dispensary connects with all the other businesses or doesn't. So we put the people through the paces of the video modules. The modules each have quizzes. Groups of the modules have tests. So we're able to make sure that the people are actually grasping the content and retaining the information.
Yeah.
And that's so important because there's a lot of misinformation that people have gotten from the news and friends. And some people have been, growing and selling in the legacy market for years.
Right.
And there's a lot of misconceptions about product quality and that kind of stuff. So we put people through these training modules to hear from documented professionals, many of them black and brown in the cannabis industry from around the country, to actually hear all the different parts of the puzzle, to actually be able to see what all the pieces look like. Okay. And we put a time frame on that about a week, because when we originally did it, we let people have it open-ended. Some people drag their butt. And I got a saying, if you're ever in a training of mine, butt draggers make no money. And that's not actually, I stole that from my boy, Casey Peel. And butt draggers make no money is very real in the cannabis industry.
Yeah.
And some people have built their entire professional, academic, or non-academic career about being a butt dragger. And it's an excuse why, and this is why. Come on, Paul, give me another chance. And, some people have been doing that since elementary school, turning in work late, showing up work till late. And the reason why we don't accept that in the boot camp in the beginning is because legal cannabis is the most competitive industry in the country.
Agreed.
It has the most regulation. It has the most optimistic, green acre opportunity. And it also has a ton of people that can impact it, control it, and regulate it that don't know a damn thing. And so there's not many industries like that. That's,
right.
And all that kind of makes it so competitive. So, we want people to have this knowledge. So we condense it into a week. It's the first test. Because when people hear the 25 hours, the first response I get in that initial introductory Zoom is, man, I don't have enough time, and blah, 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 blah. And see, that's why we have people sign a contract. Before you pay your money, you got to sign this contract saying that you understand these are the expectations. Why? Because butt draggers make no money. And what a lot of people don't understand is excuses typically only matter to the person making them.
Hey,
that business is not filled with excuses.
Nope.
And so people got to work that out of their system.
Yeah.
So, squeezing that into a week, it only comes down to about 3.5 to 4 hours a night. Okay. And if this is supposed to be your dream,
right.
Oh, Paul, I've been wanting to do this for years.
And you're going to do it all. You're going to do all you got to do.
Give up some television.
Right.
Basically what we say. When you come into our boot camp for the next 30 days, you got to give up television, give up going to your kids' sporting events, give up watching sporting events. You may have to miss Bible study. Why? Because you got an assignment due. Well, no, Paul, I can't do that. But wait a second. Your job tell your ass come to work Sunday morning because we're going to make you come in and on furlough and you're not even getting paid and you go? See, that problem is here. So I want to know that right out the gate in that first section, because some people can't get past that. There's no need for us to go any further. If you're going to keep making excuses, I had a 70-something-year-old grandmama finish the modules first. You know what I'm saying? It's like, okay.
No excuses.
No excuses at all. None. Yeah. So, that's the first part. The second part is the part I really like, because getting everybody through the modules means that when we move to the second phase, which is actually conceptualizing a business, doing a series of exercises where you start thinking about your business model, what you say you want to do, and then we pull that information out of the person in a series of classes, And at the end of this phase, they fill out a 17-page questionnaire. You're not allowed to turn it in with any blanks because all the questions on there should be able to be answered if you really have been thinking about what you want to do in this industry and you actually did the modules. See, we've had some people that think I'm stupid, like I just started this, and they had their kids do the modules and take the tests because they were doing other stuff. Let me look at you. If you do that, I will call your ass out and embarrass the hell out of you in front of everybody because you've wasted my time. My time is more valuable than your money because I can't get back my time. I can go get another customer, another student, and get some more money. But I still lost the time messing around with you butt draggers. So when we get to the second phase, it's about getting the students to go through these exercises where we don't tell them ahead of time because you got to be able to think on your feet. And it's bits and pieces of what they'll have to do when it comes to being a business owner in cannabis. And they get a chance to start thinking like a business owner. And then there's about 16 hours of those classes and exercises. And then the people that finish that phase, that's where it splits. Okay, that is where the fork comes into the situation. Because after that, we've come across, if I got 10 people in a cohort, it pretty much breaks down like this. 5 of those 10 still want to go forward with being a cannabis top-tier business owner. They want to be a dispensary owner, cultivator. They want to make edibles, something like that. Then out of the remaining 5, one of the people decide this ain't for me.
Right.
This is industry, all this stuff, this ain't for me, no problem. 1 or 2 people will say, hey, I don't want to deal with investors. I don't want to be on the hook for millions of dollars. I don't want to do that. Are there jobs in this industry? How can I find out about a job in this industry?
Right.
And we got a lane where, hey, we can take a person out of that lane, put them in this lane here, and we can put them on the job track program that we have. So as new cannabis companies open up, or new cannabis companies like Columbia Care open a location, our people that have come through our program are guaranteed an interview opportunity.
Right.
With those companies because those people have come through our credible information and training where companies can be confident in knowing, okay, these people are walking in the door with some cannabis real knowledge that they can use. So when we get to this point, the last 2 are people that say, hey, I don't want to deal with this investors and millions of dollars, but these ancillary businesses you've been talking about, how can I learn more about that? And then we take them down that path because, to be honest with you, Breon, one of the things I've come to realize through doing the boot camps is there's a hell of a lot of people out here in the Black and brown community across Virginia that have been begging and looking for an opportunity. And this is coming across their path, and it happens to be something that they're passionate about, they're interested in, and it's a viable opportunity. It's a new industry. It's not like the guy getting out here saying, I'm going to start a car detailing business. Brother, water ain't cheap. You know what I'm saying? That's yes, you can make money. However, that's not a business to be thinking about doing 20 years from now. So these ancillary businesses typically support the top tier dispensaries and cultivators. So these businesses aren't going away, but because they support the top tier business, they typically don't have licensing requirements that are stringent.
Yep.
They typically don't have the same type of financial capital to just get it open. Right. And they don't need 100 people working for them. They can work out of a storage unit, their garage to get it started, or a strip mall, plaza little storefront, and they can support those top tier businesses. And I've met people across the country, man, that are in ancillary businesses that I met a young lady, my homeboy's little sister, she made 6 figures as a college student.
Ain't nothing wrong with that.
Working part-time after class every day. Part-time, doing planograms. So, there's a lot of opportunity in cannabis. Most of it is not going to be in dispensary ownership and licensing because everybody gets caught up in that. Right. And to be real with you, man, one of the things I've learned and come to realize across the country, working with people and having students across the country, is that first, not every person that gets a license, whether they're equity or not, actually gets the business doors open.
Right.
A lot of businesses have never gotten open, and people have burned through capital trying to get it open because they didn't have a plan. They
Yeah.
didn't have a team of people.
Yep.
And because they didn't have a plan, they didn't know what the team needed to look like. And
Yep.
they just burned through their retirement and their parents' retirement. So that's been kind of scary to see because I see some of the flashes of that stuff potentially in Virginia. The other part to it that has been really eye-opening about transitioning into the business side is how many people I've met that currently own businesses or had cannabis businesses that did not realize until like year 3, year 4 of that business that they needed to be talking to politicians in their state capital to make sure the laws continued to roll out that created opportunity for them. Now, I'm not saying, hey, you get everything free, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about, like in the state of Virginia, the concept of a consumption lounge is unfathomable to the state politicians.
Right.
When you bring that up, they're like, what's that? What is that, a dispensary? No.
Yeah.
But you talk, if I put you on the phone with my guys out in Colorado, I mean, Dwayne's been in the cannabis industry 7 years.
Right.
Steve's been in the cannabis industry for like 8, 9 years. So having friends in the industry that are like way down the road into it, you get that foreshadowing and you see how business owners got to stay connected with politicians because the politicians impact the tax base.
Right.
That ultimately impacts your household.
Right.
So that's why I say, man, ancillary businesses are just as important. And to be honest with you, man, there will be more Black and brown people getting into ancillary businesses. And if I have anything to do with it, seizing career opportunity, being at the front of the hiring line with certified skill sets that are ANSI certified all across the country, that will make more of an impact than the number of people that actually get into dispensary and ownership. Right. Because you're talking about for every one person that gets a dispensary, there'll be 100 people being employed somewhere in the industry. And True. All those people being at the front end of a new industry means their income, if they just do decent business and do okay and just stay in the industry, their income will scale because their company will scale because the industry is scaling. Mm-hmm. Trying to buy Microsoft stock or Google stock right now ain't profitable. But if you would have bought that 20 years ago,
it's a different story.
Like the people in cannabis in the state of Virginia.
Different story, yeah.
Exactly. 20 years from now.
Yeah.
I mean, at the town hall, and I'll shut up about this, but to give perspective for people that are just learning about this, at the town hall that I was at a week ago over in Virginia Beach, Jeremy was sharing that the calculations that the CCA is doing and all this other stuff, that in year 5, I believe, I'm thinking 3, but I believe it was 5, Virginia's cannabis industry will be a $7 billion industry. And if you look at that $7 billion, if you look at equitable inclusion, basically being just guaranteed participation in the industry, that would basically mean about $1.9 billion will move through the Black community in the state of Virginia. And for the politicians that don't look like us, that don't have sentiments to help prop up Black communities, let me explain. If Black and brown people that have been relegated to $10 an hour jobs can finally start making $100,000 a year and paying taxes on that, the tax revenue on the local level, regional, and state level raises the tide for everyone. Yes, so the people that you've been blaming as the people pulling down the education system, the people you blame for getting into the prison system, but you control the education system and the prison system, but the people in there are the ones being blamed. Yeah. That you'll start to realize, those of you that think like that these people being able to contribute to the state's tax base will do wonders for creating new opportunity and economic outlets because that money would be created. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't exist now. Right. So that I'll step off my soapbox on that.
So as we're even starting to talk about trying to stay engaged with politicians and what the shape of the industry looks like with it being equitable and sociable with social equity in it. Could you please speak to us a little bit about the committee that you serve on, and the importance of it for cannabis, and more importantly, the importance of it for Black and brown people?
Well, man, I say it's cutting edge. I say it's cutting edge because it's cutting edge because no other state really structured the cannabis industry to roll out with these different means of oversight.
Right.
And one of the things that the Cannabis Equity Reinvestment Board does or has the ability to do is they're supposed to receive 30% of the net tax revenue. And people throw all kinds of numbers. Oh, that's billions of them. Dude, it can be anywhere from 30 to about $100 million the first year. Okay. Mm-hmm. Which is great. But that money is able to be used by this board, and it's able to be re-injected into the community where it sees fit to be able to help, overcome and bridge some of the gaps that have been created by the war on drugs. How it has blighted communities. People think, oh, well, the guy got arrested. But if that guy had a wife and 2 kids, and that wife and 2 kids lost their house and had to go live in the projects because he was in jail, you see, all of that stuff has an impact. So the Cannabis Equity Reinvestment Board, it's not about giving away money and stuff like that. Really, what the things that we have considered is a long list, and we haven't nailed down to a specific thing because the governor has not allowed us to meet. Mm-hmm. So, but just in things that were discussed in that original meeting were like programs to prop up ancillary businesses, because an ancillary business may be able to get started and rolling with 10 grand rather than 2 million.
Absolutely.
And if that 10 grand can be put into a business through grants and other mechanisms, and that business turns into a business where it's got 4 or 5 employees and it's generating, $500,000 in revenue every year. Mm-hmm. That's a win, not just for that individual, but for the community, because that money will circulate back through the community.
Absolutely.
And that's what's so important. Another thing that, what the Cannabis Equity Reinvestment Board is about making sure that the industry is open for everyone.
Right.
In a lot of places where cannabis opened up, you had one of 2 situations. You had some parts of California where if you were a felon and you were Black, you were eligible for an equity license. And people got those licenses but had no money. So the business deals that end up stemming off of the back end of that were horrible and created a lot of challenge and destroyed a lot of financial resources for people. The other side to this industry that you've seen in a lot of places like Colorado is if you are rich and you'll pay the fees that whatever the municipality sets, you can just step into the industry regardless of who you are, regardless of what you've done. Right. And that is not cool, because that is everywhere that's been done. It just creates more economic problems down the road, because the people that should have been getting included are in the same position, but now they've watched people that were already good even further away. You see what I'm saying? But communities still want to blame the Black and brown people because they don't make no money. So when I hear that kind of nonsense, I always say, if you are somebody that is anti-inclusion for minorities in the cannabis industry, we better not ever meet, because one, you're economically stunted in terms of your mental, and you really don't understand how the dollar works. And it's more important for dollars to circulate through Virginia. Virginia in the past couple decades has really shown that it's pro-big business, not the small business owner. They talk about programs for the small business owner, but to give you perspective, you have an idea of what it takes to open up a small business. If we're talking a frozen yogurt shop, that's typically $150,000 to $250,000 in invested capital to open that business. Okay.
Right.
Now, if you look at that and how many times people do that and the amount of money, and then you look at when the governor says, hey, look, we're rolling out this grant program where we're issuing $2 million for small business. That ain't significant in the state of Virginia. $2 million for 8.6 million people?
Yeah.
And I'm not talking like just black people. There's white people, Asian people.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to be in business. So if the average cost of startup is at least 250 grand, you're only helping a dozen people. But it looks good politically. It looks good, gets a press conference, and the people that are clapping don't realize it's fugazi. You know, it is that whole, look at the shiny thing over here.
Right.
While I'm taking the money out your pocket over there.
Right. So let me ask you this.
It's a problem.
How many times, since you've been on the board, how many times have you got on the committee, excuse me, how many times have you guys actually met? Since the inception of the committee?
Since the inception, we met one time. The original meeting that we had with Dr. Underwood, where they had the program where we had to go through all of the compliance stuff with the state, meet with the state's attorneys, understanding what we could and could not say, what we could and could not do. Mm-hmm. And then at that meeting, we discussed the next meeting, which was going to kick, because that meeting was towards the end of the year, going into the holidays. And then the next meeting was going to be under the new governor after the first of that year. And the new governor came in and started moving the goalposts like he likes to do, where he kept changing things and changing titles where we were not able to meet. And then it got to a point where a year had gone by, and then we were getting ready to actually expire, you know, because we had to meet by a certain time, and that was the 15th of last December. And they dropped the ball. Put it like this. If the governor was the quarterback, boy, oh boy, he would have been benched a long time ago. Because I'm talking about fumble after fumble after fumble on the goal line, fumble on his own goal line, bad. Yeah. So one time in the last 2 years.
That's poor. Oh, that's poor for lack of a better term. That's quite poor. Especially when you're when you're building out this industry and you have people that want to do the work and that want to see the advancement and the betterment of minorities here in Virginia.
Right.
And more importantly, black and brown people here in Virginia. Is quite poor. So let me ask you this. So we just wrapped up session 23 just wrapped up. What were your takes? What are your takeaways from it? And what do you possibly think we got coming up down the road? Because we know the fight isn't over. We just gotta keep going.
The fight is not over at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's just stuck in quicksand. It's on pause. Mm-hmm. It's on hold. The way this whole Virginia legalization process is structured, a lot of things got to line up. And the last few years, they have not lined up at all. And I'm talking about Democratic issues, Republican issues.
Right.
You know, conservative, liberal, old, young, black, white, however you want to look at it, there's been a ton of issues. And what I've seen is that when it starts to look promising, you start to be able to see the clarity of what the opportunity is, people start, okay, it looks like it's close. Now I got to put my stupidity into this. And then their personal greed, their greed on behalf of their corporate donors, because this is an election year in Virginia.
Absolutely.
And you started seeing people proposing stuff and asking for stuff and demanding stuff be included that does nothing to further the opportunity economically. It's all personal. That's one thing. The other thing, though, man, is in recognizing that and realizing we're in an election year. Everybody in Richmond is in the hot seat. Mm-hmm. And that's why our organization feels like the most important thing that people can do now, since legislation is pretty much dead for the year until we get to the next year, is get as active politically as you physically can. And when I say active, I don't mean watching some stuff on TV. I mean, go to the websites that you can easily Google and track down and go find out how your state representative, your state legislator has voted for cannabis on
Right.
your behalf.
Right.
Because I think if a lot of people go do that, they're going to find out that the person they've been saying, "Attaboy, that's my girl, good job," black and white, have not been voting for cannabis. You know, there's been people that have publicly talked about being pro-cannabis, but every time it's a chance to vote, nay, shoot it down. So I'm not going to mention names. That's why I encourage people to go do the research, because when you start seeing the research, no, I had no idea. Now, that's the first part to this. The other part I'll say, everybody's got to go get 10 friends to go do the same thing.
Yeah.
Because one of the biggest, I'm not a big political guy, but when you go back and you look at some of the interviews and the documentaries about why Hillary Clinton did not beat Trump, there was a lot of assumptions made. Oh, I don't need to go campaign there. Oh, we got that all sold up.
Right.
Oh, the people are going to come out and vote.
Right.
And because the people didn't come out and vote, none of that other stuff mattered. So it's like it canceled everything. So it's important in the state of Virginia when it comes to cannabis this year that people know who the people that are representing them are actually believing and saying about cannabis. The other thing is, it's even more important to know who is representing you, because the whole state has been restructured.
Right.
And so there's a lot of campaign territory that is new for politicians.
Right.
So you may have somebody representing you this year that didn't represent you the last 40 years you lived in that house. You know what I'm saying? So you need to go find out who this is. And because of how the redistricting has happened, there's a lot of people that have been allies the past decade or so who are now enemies because they're fighting for the same seat. So this is an opportunity for people that are cannabis advocates and pro-cannabis in the state to do the political push and get the right people in place, so we got realistic people in those seats next January when we have to revisit this conversation a fourth time.
Right. I don't know if that was some shade or not, but the fourth time. But I do understand that. And I really want our viewers to know that, especially here in Virginia, every single seat that was in the House of Delegates and as well as in the Virginia Senate is up for election this November. So I would, as Paul said, tell it to other people. So if you have a plan, I would most definitely create a plan now to go forth and making sure you got somebody to go vote with. Go ahead and get your voting buddies ready. And even sign them to be those election workers, those poll workers, because we really do need it.
Register to vote.
And register, that is the most important part.
And one thing I will share that I hadn't learned until recently is people that have lost their right to vote because they have been incarcerated can get their voting rights back. And there's agencies out here and people out here like Uganda and others that are trying to help those people that don't know you can get your voting rights back. I want you to get your voting rights back, because you can't physically run up and put your hands on a politician, but you can just vote them out of office and not have to deal with them. So let's do that. Let's get them up out of office.
Simply, and make sure you just vote with your heart, vote with your conscience, vote with who you truly do believe support your values, not just voting on party lines. I know that we tend to do that, but just really go with that individual that you believe supports you, as far as in business, whether it's in you want to buy a house, all of those things matter. Especially here in the States. So just go forth and do that. I don't want to spend too much time on that. That's my soapbox. But before we go ahead and get up out of here for today, Paul, can you tell us what's next for you? What does the coalition have on the horizon, and where can we catch you at soon?
Okay, well, if you have not been to our website, I always encourage people to check out our website, because it's the hub of information. And there's a lot of different resources on there. The web address is VMCC, Victor Michael Charlie, equity.org, VMCCequity.org. When you go there, you'll see the icons. You can follow us on all the social platforms. You can submit an application for our boot camp. That application button is in the top right corner. But there's something that we added that it's a tab that says resources. And when you go to that tab, I have several sections there of links to articles, videos, blog posts about different aspects of getting into the cannabis industry as a
Mm-hmm.
business owner. A lot of articles and things that I read over the years that helped me put together the structure of the coalition, identifying what was going to be needed. There's a lot of stuff on there that's written from the perspective of the people that opened the dispensary, opened the cultivation farm. So tapping into those resources,
Right.
I encourage people to jump on that. And then you can also check us out on YouTube. Just go to YouTube or you can just Google us now. I love that. But search VMCC Equity TV. And we have 30 or more videos on there from past cannabis opportunity movement events,
Mm-hmm.
boot camps, conference calls, things that we've done where you can see who we are and you can have information that's credible, that is it's able to be applied, you know what I'm saying, and it's productive information. What
Right.
do we have on the horizon is a lot more political engagement during the summer. We are supposed to be working with the folks for the High Tide Cannabis Festival. We're looking to start doing some new events this summer,
Okay.
helping people just be outside, consumer related events, education events, and then picking up boot camps after the summer, right as kids start to get ready to go back to school. And then we're also rolling out the job skills training programs because every cannabis company that opens up in the state of Virginia will need employees, and it's better to hire employees that are trained and skilled in that discipline.
Right.
So we're going to start rolling out those programs here very soon. We're finishing up the last touches on that. So more education, more empowerment, more teaching, and just trying to give people an opportunity to get the info.
Yeah. Well, that is really good, Paul. I'm glad that we could have you on. So before we get out here, ladies and gentlemen, we have Mr. Paul McLean. Let's get up on one more time.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. I enjoyed myself today. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Thank you so much for coming on. Before we get out of here, I want to leave with the great words of Ty Diddy. No one deserves to be in jail for smoking weed. This is Canna Breon signing off saying safe blazing.
Later.